First off, just wanted to thank everybody for this opportunity to present. Yeah, I'm kind of sandwiched in between really good coaches, so hopefully too many people didn't go on their dinner breaks while I'm presenting right now. But excited to be here. Offensive flow, kind of a buzzword that people have been using over the last little bit. So just hoping to give you guys some ideas. So basically, this whole presentation, how I wanted to do it was just to spark some conversation, to get everybody thinking. I'm definitely a huge video watcher and fan of the game, so I'm constantly just trying to improve and watch as many games as I can. So hopefully, this can kind of do that for you as well. I'm going to give some example concepts, not only from CBU and things that I've done in the past, but also things that are out there and that people are talking about. And then obviously at the end, I have some video that I'm hopefully going to be able to get to and go through to show examples of some former teams that I've had the pleasure to coach. So where does this idea come from as far as layering? I would say basically it started with staff discussions that I've had in the past, and the kind of innate wanting to watch aesthetically pleasing basketball. One of my least favorite things is seeing a point guard standing at the top of the floor at the end of the possession and putting their fist up, asking for some type of pick and roll. I mean, I really hate that. So obviously it still happens. Things aren't perfect within what we do, but we're trying to minimize that as much as we can. So what is layering? So basically it's breaking your offense down into components. And so why would you want to do that? Well, I think it's important to tell your players this, to get them thinking about what's next all the time, to get them constantly thinking about how there's always something to do. If things mess up, like things are going to do on 50% of the possessions or more, what are we going to do? I feel it's an easier way to kind of break down film and your practice down into components so you can work on very specific things. And then I think you get more into adjusting reads rather than just changing sets all the time. So you can add things or subtract things from what you're currently doing rather than adding a whole bunch of different things every time you go to play a different opponent. And I think the last thing is that it forces teamwork and communication. And I'm a huge believer of that. Coming back to CBU 2 years ago, the big thing that I was trying to do was really force team-based offense and team-based defense. And to me, that's something that's really important for the long-term success of a program. So I know a lot of coaches have kind of touched on these ideas through some of these conversations, but I think it's important to think about these questions before you get into exactly what you're going to do with your team. So what type of team do you have? The season and duration. Are you working with a national team, provincial team, post-secondary team, secondary rec team? Coaching a U Sports University team versus coaching a U17 provincial team. Those things are very different in how you can teach and do things. So what are you going to be doing that? And then also, what are the goals of the team? Are you just trying to improve, win your league, win nationals? And then what stage of development of your players? Also for your program, to be able to beat certain teams, you have to do very specific things, I feel, at the youth sports level. So where are you on that path of development with your team and with your program to be able to do those things? And then I think obviously really important is who are your players? So how many creators, shooters, post players do you have, and what kind of depth do you have? If you only have one shooter and that player gets into foul trouble, are you going to be able to run a system that's based on that shooter? Are you going to be able to run a system that's based on only having one point guard who's making decisions for you all the time? I think you also have to really think about, where do your best players need the ball? What do they do well? And really sit back and analyze those things. And then obviously, who do you want making the decisions? In flow, late shot clock, late game, who do you want making those decisions is obviously really important. And then who's your competition? What's going to work against the competition? if you're in preseason league playing nationally or internationally, who are you playing against? What are the trends that you're going to be, having to design something around? And then what type of defense are you going to see? So it wouldn't make a lot of sense to my program to design this intricate man-to-man or player-to-player offensive system and then have to go against zone every game. So I think those things are super important and really have to sit back and have these conversations. And then what do you like as a coach? I think this is a really important question to ask yourself in a lot of ways. For me, ever since all of this has started, I think it's day 73 for me. I can't tell you how many Kansas Jayhawk games that I've watched. I love watching Bill Self. I love watching, their high-low continuity. I had a Zoom call with Coach Greg Gard over the last couple of weeks from University of Wisconsin, who runs the swing offense, and he was amazing of diagramming everything. I love it. My assistant coaches have run flex for years, so I like to call it the swing. They say that I say the flex is like a bad word around our office sometimes, but I love the flex. I ran it for Coach Mike Rayo when I was playing in high school as well. So Mark Pope at BYU, if you get a chance to watch his stuff, it's pretty unbelievable of how he's running continuity pick and roll and how efficient they are. Obviously, big Tony Bennett fan, blocker mover, and getting players running off of different screens. And finally, I think Coach Budenholzer with the Bucks, he's kind of revolutionizing, things in the NBA of how everybody's kind of running this 5-out, running to spots, not crossing the floor. All of these things are really important, and would love to answer questions about any of these examples if people want to do it. So I think this is a really important point, though, to all of this, is being able to define creativity for your team. And I think there's two ways, and both of them are effective. And, I've obviously, I feel like with teams, we've had success doing a little bit of both. But I think that first way of creativity is little to no structure. So in a lot of ways, when the coach just kind of rolls the balls out and says, okay, we're going to have players make plays, I think that is a way to be creative. If you think of like the Houston Rockets, I mean, James Harden is constantly making plays, and it's not like they're running a whole bunch of structure, but he's able to get to certain points. And a lot of times, coaches have good enough players to be able to do those things. And then the second way to define creativity is having multiple options within structure. And then the creativity equals, knowing what the right read is. So if you're setting a very specific screen, if there was 3, 4, 5, 6 options, like we're going to talk about here in a little bit, creativity means I'm going to pick the right option within that read or within that action so that we can score and be effective. I'm hoping that makes sense to everybody. But again, I think that's a really important thing. So again, here's an example. So within our offense, if there's a high post touch, for example, we'll run a guard-to-guard screen, and there's essentially 5 reads within it, and 4 cut reads. And so we call it a basket cut, an I go cut, a you go cut, a sling cut, and an accept cut. All right. So just to show you what that looks like, we do that both out of the low and the high post. So whenever it comes to a high post cut, a low post touch or a high post touch, we come together with 2 guards and we're making that read. Now, how we do that is the person who can see the majority of the floor is the person that's making that call. So for example, on the far side, on the right side of the screen here, it talks about a high post touch. So 3's coming over the top after the high post gets the touch, going to set a screen for 1 in the corner. In this instance, for example, the 1 would have the call to say, I go, you go, sling, accept. And so if that person says, I go, that means they're the person that's back cutting and putting their head under the rim. If that person says, you go, the other person is. We designate sling as the one curling the 3 and cutting to the basket. And finally would just be accept, come right off that screen from the 3 to get a dribble handoff with the 4. So hopefully that's clear, just to kind of give you an example. And obviously we do the same thing out of the low post. The 5 would touch it, and we flow out of different actions out of that, which we'll get into as this talk kind of moves forward. So to define what the layers are, for the programs that I've worked with in the past, this is how we've defined them. So 5 very specific things. The first thing would be transition. The second would be actions or secondary. The third would be your primary offense. The fourth would be your points of emphasis for scoring, what's going to be effective for your team. And 5 would be continuous action. So transition is the one thing that I've been really working hard on this offseason, or trying to talk to as many people as I can about what the right thing is to do in transition. So I don't think there's necessarily the right thing or the wrong thing. So I'm just trying to give a bunch of examples again for people to kind of think about what they can do. So obviously there's the LMU Loyola Marymount, their numbered break, which is a 4-round-1 setup, having the 2s and 3s running each wing, having a 4 trail, 5 running to the front of the rim. That's a really good example, kind of something that people have been using for a long time. I'm probably going to botch this, but you know, how the Carleton runs their break, or had run their break under Coach Smart, which was a matchup break, and it revolved around a 3-around-2 setup where their best matchup would always run the right side of the floor so that they could get the ball into that person's hands and they could play high-low out of a 3-around-2 set. Going back to talking about Coach Budenholzer with the Bucks, they run a 5-out transition where they're not trying to cross the floor at any time. They just want to be able to run to specific spots so that they can play out of that. The only time that they do run to the rim in transition is if what they call a mouse situation. So they have a big on a guard guarding a big in transition. So they'll run that big to the front of the rim so that they can get that matchup. Or they'll run a turtle situation where they have a big guarding a guard on the perimeter, and they'll find that matchup so that they can attack that as early as they can. The 2-side break, which Coach Oliver has talked a lot about, which is just a single side ball handler and throwing skip passes to a 2-guarded side to force the defense in transition to make decisions. And another example is post ahead versus post behind or even, just being able to do things out of both those situations. Talking to Coach McKay, and I know he talks a lot about it, but he defines all of this kind of as a roadmap. A lot of teams will run transition based out of a roadmap. So where are specific players? You know, I'm the ball handler with the ball. Where are the players that I'm seeing ahead of me? We're running action based on where those players are positioned. So the 5 and the 4 could be in the corner. There could be a trail guard. Whatever that roadmap is, we're gonna train our players to run specific actions out of those things. Coach Mike Dunlap, who used to coach with the Charlotte Bobcats and with Loyola Marymount, he called it tricks, and I thought it was pretty cool. He talked about that first 6 to 8 seconds and how important that is. You know, and watching Coach Triano's presentation the other day, he talked about the points per possession, decreasing as the shot clock, you went into the shot clock. So Coach was just talking about, you know, that first 6 to 8 seconds, what kind of tricks are you doing? Are you doing, you know, teaching that in practice, working on the different reads in small-sided games? How are you doing that? And those scoring opportunities are really important. One of the things that I really like to do within practice as well is to emphasize the transition, is to double the points in the first 6 to 8 seconds whenever we play 5-on-5. So if you have a coach or a manager or whoever counting that shot clock, and if you're able to get a layup or a 3 or any type of shot that's made in the first 6 to 8 seconds, you double the points for that. So I feel that's a really effective way to emphasize pushing the pace and getting your team thinking about that. So then you move into the second layer, which for us is actions or secondary. And the term that we like to use is getting a turn. And so actions and secondary, in my definition, just means getting the ball changing sides of the floor. that means bodies moving and the defense is moving. And I think that's a really important thing. If you're not scoring, just straight running, getting a layup, you have to change sides of the floor to get that defense moving so that they can't set up. So again, you can pick whatever you want for your trigger as far as what that's going to mean. For us in the past, we've used passes as our trigger to trigger our actions into our secondary actions. So are you passing to the wing? Are you passing to the trail? Are you passing it directly into the post? Are you doing a dribble handoff with the strong side? All of those things can trigger the actions that you do. Sometimes you're going to use a pick and roll to be able to do that. Are you going to use a drag, a double drag, a pistol action to kind of get things moving for your team? I think a question that you have to really ask yourself and be honest with is, can your team score out of this? The example that I like to use is at one point this year, we would run our through the four or our trail action. We were running a chin set. So we're cutting our point guard off of the 5 into the post, who was a big player. Our point guard this past season was 6'5". So we could throw it into him every once in a while into the post, but teams were doing a really good job of taking that away. So a lot of times it would come back to the flare screen for the 4. And our 4 was great at getting to spots and getting downhill, not necessarily as good of a shooter, or teams weren't respecting him as a shooter at this point of the season. So it was something that we had to change and make sure that we were doing a better job of. So again, asking these questions about your team and being honest about them, I think is important. My assistant coach and I, my lead assistant this past year, David Kapinga, like we would sit in the office for hours and basically get into like straight out arguments about this stuff and go at each other. And that's okay. Like, I think that you have to have those tough conversations at times in order to be better. And then again, within these actions, are you able to break them down? I think it is important to be able to break things down in practice. Not all the time, but to make sure that you're making the right reads, a lot like what Coach Morrison was talking about in the last presentation. So are you having a coach in a 3-on-3 situation, for example? Are you going to have a coach guard? Are you going to be guided? Are you going to be live? And the example of that would be a stagger. So if you're running a stagger away, we would use all the same reads within that guard to guard screen of the stagger that we would use in any high post or low post touch. So if on the screen here, the 4 and the 2 are setting the stagger away for the 1, well, within that, the 2 and the 1 would have all 4 of those same reads of I go, you go, slinger, except within that stagger. So in a game, you can make that right read. The goal within that stagger was always to have a guard come to the top of the floor and always to have a guard end up at the wing with the 4 and the low post. So you can play this in the example here. The 3 could be a coach. You could have 3 people on the side, playing 3-on-3 to make sure that you're, cueing that within practice as well. A lot of times with coaches, this might be enough. You run that one single action. Maybe that's enough. The term that everybody's using these days is dominoes. Maybe that's enough to get the defense moving for you, and that's all you want to do. So if that is the case, I think there's some important things that you have to make sure of. And the one important thing that the NBA does better than anybody in the world is driving windows. So whenever somebody has the basketball and there's some type of penetration, whether it be top down, from the slot, whether it be baseline penetration, wing to the middle, the NBA, if you watch, those guys basically can throw passes with their eyes closed because they know where everybody's going to be. They know where their windows are going to be for shooters so that they can kick it out. So if this is enough, you have to make sure that you're establishing those rules within drills and with your 5-on-5 setup at some point so that you can get it to the right people. And maybe, again, it comes back to those concepts of creativity that we talked about earlier. What are you doing that's enough for your team? So again, these are questions that you're going to have to ask yourself. Within what we do, we always come back to some type of primary flow. So you get a turn, you shift the defense, you don't score. Now what are you going to do? And so things that I've done in the past, or great examples would be, are you going to run high-low? Are you going to run dribble drive motion? I've always called it Canada ball screen because everybody in Canada uses it, the 5-out ball screen. You know, are you going to go to that? Are you going to run blocker mover? Again, I'll show you different examples of this on video here when we get to the end of the slideshow. The next part with this would be your points of emphasis. So again, some really important questions for you to ask yourself and to get to know your team is, how will we most effectively score? Maybe you have a really good shooting team. Maybe you have a team that can get to the rim. You have to figure those things out. But I think the most important thing is, how can we put pressure on the paint? I feel like getting to that 8-foot mark within the paint, that's when you can collapse defenses, and that's when you're able to make decisions. And I feel like that's a really important thing to be able to do. How can you do that most effectively with your team? And then again, how can we most easily learn the correct reads of a team? Maybe the I go, you go, sling, accept is too much for your team, but what's something that you can do to teach the right reads and drill that point of emphasis for your team? So again, the example of that would be in Canada ball screen. So I feel like there's some very different ways of thinking about playing within the pick and roll. Are you just going to be concerned about the coverage that you're facing against the team that you're going to be preparing for? Or are you only going to be concerned about the matchup? So if you're just concerned about the matchup and being able to throw it into the post on that isolation, or getting a one-on-one from the perimeter on isolation, that's a really important question to ask. Or are you just going to be concerned with the blitz coverage or the switch or the ice? Whatever you're going to do, you have to be able to drill that and read that. Again, an example within blocker mover would be post touches, getting the high post touch or a low post touch. And again, another way to emphasize this, I feel, within 5-on-5, it doesn't have to be all the time, but increase the points whenever your team is doing that within practice. So do you get a high post touch and get a score out of it? Maybe you get a low post touch, but you don't score. Maybe that's an extra point just because you got that touch that you were looking for. These are all things to incentivize, how you want to play, and to get your players thinking about what's going to be most effective for your team to be able to score. The next part that I'll talk about is just a continuous action. So again, you're flowing, you're doing all this, you throw it into the post, you get a pick, whatever it is, you don't score on your points of emphasis. Now, what are you doing? And I feel like these are always the time, what I was talking about earlier, where the point guard puts his or her hand over her head and says, come and get me for a ball screen. I mean, maybe that's the right thing for your team if you have a really effective playmaker, but you have to be able to figure that out. So what are you going to do out of that? Are you going to get into spacing, into the dominoes? Are you going to get into, pick and roll continuous, Canada ball screen? How can we flow into this, and how can we keep building towards this so everybody's thinking that there's something to do all the time? A really good example, I feel, is if you take 4 minutes and you type in fist mode, Bill Self in YouTube. He goes over what they do if something screws up. So anytime the ball gets into the post or something screws up, they go into fist mode, and it's how they run pick and roll. It's it's worth the 4 or 5 minutes of your time to be able to go through that, just to kind of give you an idea of how that works. We're going to go into examples of what I've done on any time there's a post touch and a split screen, how you get into Canada ball screen, also get into a 51 screen like I was talking about. But the important thing with that, especially at the end of the shot clock, is creating that separation with the 5 and their defender, so that you can create that advantage late in the shot clock rather than just be a switch or something that bogs the offense down at that point in time. One of the last points before we get into the video here is skipping steps. And that's a great thing. I think that's an important thing to talk about again with your team. Obviously, when there's a dead ball or a make, sometimes when the play is slower and building, you're going to be skipping certain steps. Like, you're not going to be, trying to get into transition or something early for a layup. Normally your action or your secondary is going to initiate what you're going to do. Maybe in transition, you do throw it into the post or you get to the rim off penetration, and that's one of your points of emphasis that you use as a coach. So you're going to be skipping your secondary action as a step and getting more into your flow or your continuous action. So again, these are things that are important. And again, I think it's something to make clear to your team so that when you're kind of going through things, they understand exactly what you're talking about. So at CBU, for example, this is what the five layers that we were talking about. This is what we used the past couple of years. So we ran a left side break where we ran the 5 to the front of the rim. Our passes triggered our actions. So we had a pass ahead, pass behind, dribble handoff. That's what triggered what we were trying to get into. Our primary action was blocker mover. So we wanted our guards running off of high posts and low posts to be able to get open. We were able to do that as a continuous action. Our points of emphasis were trying to get post touches. It wasn't necessarily for those players to score, but we felt that that put the most pressure on the defense and the most pressure on the paint, whether that be in the high post or the low post. And then our continuous flow was Canada ball screen. So out of everything that we did, whether it was a low post touch or a high post touch, we were always getting into that. So the guys knew at the end of a shot clock or when things messed up, that that's what we were trying to go to. So I'm going to try to bring up the video examples here. Is that working?
Looks like it right now. Yeah, you dropped out of the slideshow.
Okay, so is the video popped up?
Not yet, no.
No, okay, hold on one second. Good now?
Yeah, video's up. You bet.
Oh, okay, perfect. So just wanted to be able to show some examples again here of what we tried to do. So again, just showing that we were a left side break team. So every time that there was a score or a miss, we were trying to get up the left side of the floor as quickly as we could. And this is just a couple examples of easy baskets, even after a score, where we were trying to get the ball ahead, put pressure on the paint, so that we were able to score. We, at CBU, our 4, who is our trailer and our trigger man that we call all the time, his name's Paul Watson. He's about 6'7", and he's a great ball handler. So it made it very difficult for teams to guard us in transition and to press us because of how he could handle the ball. So a lot of times within our actions, we were able to give him the ball and he was able to create a lot for us. So here he's putting pressure on the defense, being able to find shooters so that we can get open shots. So now we move more into actions of what were triggered. So again, here's a situation where there's no transition, there's no semi-transition. We call this action 4 down. So our 4 goes to set a down screen, and we flow into blocker mover out of that. So pin down, we always want to give our point guard a live dribble again after that. And you can see our one guard coming off of a high post flare and a second guard with his head under the rim coming off of a low post pin. So again, there's a post touch. That's one of our points of emphasis. And then we have our come together screens. So Ozzy here, he's going to set a screen for Jason. Jason, you see it's blatantly obvious what he's trying to do here. He's the one who can see the floor. So he's telling Ozzy exactly what he should be doing. He's telling him, you go to the rim to try to catch the defense off guard. He takes 2 players with him, and that opens up Jason for the shot. So again, 4 down, get our point guard live dribble again, high post touch this time as one of our points of emphasis. Okay, come together screen with our guard to guard. That opens up one of our shooters for a 3. So again, because our 4 was so effective at bringing the ball up the floor, we had to construct ways to, when we were giving the ball up early to him, how can he get us into some of our go-to actions that we wanted to run in order to be effective? So here Paul is making a DHO on the side with the 3, again, giving it back to the point guard to create a live dribble. And again, we're looking for a post touch, come together screen. And again, you can see our spacing on the weak side here. Our point guard is cut through to the opposite corner. Our opposite post is filled high. Our other guard's on the 45. We actually, within our Canada ball screen, we like to come up on the lane line extended rather than the middle of the floor so that we can give a little bit more room. Here the team switches, so we're able to get the ball into the post for an easy score. So again, we give it up early. We're here, we give it back. This time we're able to come off the pin down for an open 3. So again, we're just trying to flow and layer everything on top of it. Our 4 again, hand off, coming off the pin in, coming off the flare. Here's a high post touch. Again, not necessarily a perfect possession, giving it right back. But here, because Ozzy is the leading scorer in the league and our best scorer, we wanted to get him the ball as quickly as we can. But again, you can see the spacing on the weak side kind of coming together. They know we're trying to get into some type of pick and roll continuous, so that when X blitzes us here, we're able to get that high-low look for our post. So another read that we would use, Dalhousie is one of the best teams in the country, and they would pressure like crazy. So how do we relieve that pressure within one of our actions? So again, we're just layering on. These are the reads that we're talking about. So here CJ comes off the pin down from the 4, and he's going to go set a guard-to-guard screen, again, to create that space for our point guard so that we can make a read off of what we're trying to do. So he goes off the flare after that. We get the high post touch. And again, we have a tall point guard, so we're able to get the ball inside to him and get an N1 finish. Here's against Dal again. 4 down. We set that guard-to-guard screen to open it up. We come over the top. They're getting used to it. Capos backs off because he knows that we're trying to get into some type of split action, and that allows Ebe to go to the rim for a layup. Push the tempo, 4 down again. This time we keep. Okay, we get that high post catch. Ozzy made a great cut to put his head on the front of the rim. They stayed with it. Look at all the space that created for us. So Ozzy cleared through. Again, you can see the spacing that's forming on the weak side here as we get into our dribble handoff series or our pick and roll series. And here Isaiah comes off, finds the roller, and we're able to finish. Our 4 bring the ball up again. Okay, getting that live dribble. We rescreen on this side if nothing's open. So the pin down wasn't open, the flare wasn't open. We didn't have a high post touch on this side. We rescreened within our blocker mover. Jason brought it back to the other side. Cooper's ducking in because he feels like he has a great matchup. So this gets us into some flow. We're able to get the ball into Ozzy's hands, and he makes a great play. So Paul's bringing the ball up again for us. And so again, this is how we're transitioning into different things. So again, our point guard wasn't able to find anybody coming off the pin, get it into the high post. So we set a step-up ball screen within this. And again, that's just kind of another layer of and read that we're working on within the flow of what we're trying to do. And so our 5, in this case, he sets the step-up screen and rolls, and we fill in behind with our 4 coming in behind. So again, we can get into Canada ball screen, but because Paul's so effective at getting to the rim, he's able to get into the paint and get to the line. Same thing here. We've given up to our 4 early. We're getting into this same step-up screen. Okay, so we come off the flare. Jason's getting ready to come off the pin. We step up within our flow. Cooper rolls. That lets Isaiah get to the rim so that he can finish. Jason again So this is another read that we would have out of it if we wanted to get high post touches on both sides. So Paul was the 4. He was going to set a pin down. And so we're also able to flow into horns out of this and how we do things. So Jason gives it up, comes off, puts his head under the rim like we always try to teach. All right. And then again, you can see us getting into our Canada ball screen spacing out of all of our flow. So Paul, Ozzy, and Jason are on this side. CJ comes off, able to attack and get to the rim in that instance. 4 down again. We're stepping up with our 5. Again, our 4 is trailing in behind. This time Paul decides to hit the 3. And then we're again flowing into our horns actions here. So again, getting a live dribble for our point guard is obviously very important. Okay, we're able to get into horns. This time he enters to the high post, comes off, makes the right read, hits a shooter in the weak side corner. And again, this is all out of just one set for us. So this is 4 down. So all of these reads you can just continue to build on. So he decided to dribble off the 4 within the horns. We flared off of that. All right. And that created Paul a driving opportunity and a back cut for us. So again, we're just building off of all of our reads constantly and trying to get to certain things. So again, here's our horn set. This time he comes off the 5 side. We wanted our 5 to roll because they weren't sure whether to switch or not. That gave us that open layup. So a couple of years ago, when I coached with the University of Calgary, different team, just kind of wanted to show the different approaches that we use with that team. So with CBU, we had a really good 4 who we wanted the ball in his hand, bring the ball up a lot of the times. And at Calgary, with Kapinga and Mombi, we wanted the ball in their hands as much as possible and really attacking the defense. So David was pretty relentless at being able to headman on that left side of the floor to Mombi to get that ball ahead as much as he could. So here, even on a miss, we were able to get this early pick and roll because Mombi just put so much pressure on the defense and able to get downhill. So again, here we go, pushing up the floor. So this is a good example of skipping steps. So we threw it into the post right away. You can see David right here. He's going across to be able to try to set a guard-to-guard screen in this instance, right? And that always flows into a step-up screen with our low post. And because of that, we're flowing into ball screen continuous. So again, Mombi has it. You can see Lars on this side. It's a little late, but he's running to the top of the floor to try to create that space for the Canada ball screen action while Mombi gets to the rim here in this case. I thought this was just a really great example of things kind of screwing up. So we talked about head manning and getting turns early. So here's a great example of getting 1 turn, okay, nothing, getting a second turn, and that shifted the defense enough to be able to create an advantage for us so that we could get the ball inside. All right. So we showed when the 4 was denied, so that 4 down action that we talked about with CBU. So this was a through the 4 action, which is a stagger away. So all of our different options out of a stagger away. And you can see the guys working through, even on bad possessions, working through to trying to get the spots and creating that spacing constantly. So again, here it is through Johnny this time. Lars a little late setting it. We create a single screen, cleanup screen, all right, for Mombi to be able to get into the paint. So again, we're always we were working to flow into blocker mover continuously. Through the 4, okay, again, messed up, but our 5 was able to trail the ball. We got this turn, and again, you can see them constantly working to get into blocker mover and how they're trying to do things. There's Mombi hitting a shot. Okay, again, through the 4. Stagger away, clean up. Okay, high post touch. Trying to get something, so he comes off this time, finds the roller for a finish. Through the 4, stagger away. Again, not perfect, but they're working to do the right things. Okay, working to get into the paint, low post touch, looking for that split screen. We get a skip pass and able to get into a pretty good player's hands, and he's able to make a play. Again, always trying to put pressure on the defense, head manning the basketball. And here's some 4-down read options we were able to use with that team. So they really like to top lock Mambi off this initial pin down. And because of that top lock, it was basically impossible for them to switch. So they were denying so hard in this case that Mambi was able to set a pin, a guard-to-guard screen at the top that allowed him to get David to get into the paint for a layup. And again, 4-down action. Changing sides of the floor. Okay, into Horns. Able to get a slip. Again, not a perfect possession, but again, they're working to get into something constantly, which is important, right? They're constantly trying to do the right thing. Okay, high post touch. Able to go away this time. Here comes Mambi for the over the top. Again, they're working for Canada ball screen. You can see here we have this screen on this side. Connor's getting ready to move into position for Canada ball screen to create that spacing for us to get that open shot. So basically that's the gist of what I wanted to present to everybody. I wanted to make sure that I shared all my information for everybody. There's my cell phone number, my email. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all with the same handle. So you can catch me there at Coach Matt Skinn. Feel free to reach out. I think it's really important to have people to talk to about the stuff that you're trying to do. And I was very fortunate to have really good coaches who I either worked for or played for in the past to be able to share information with, whether that be Mike Rayo or Steve Bauer, Dan Van Horn or Dan Pearson. So if you need somebody like that, feel free to reach out.
Coach, a couple questions for you here. That was great stuff. With your 4-down, all the options that you guys have out of that, depending on the reads, are you showing your players the whole and then showing them this is our reads off the flare, this is our reads off of the pin down, or are you just letting them work through those progressions? So I guess for the rest of the coaches, 3-on-3 build up or showing it 5-on-5 and then going through it?
Yeah, definitely 5-on-5 early in the season, as far as just showing that exactly what we're looking for, because the timing of block remover can be pretty tough sometimes, of getting the guard coming off of the flare and getting that as a continuous action. So we'll definitely show that as a whole, and then we'll break things down. And then, like I was trying to talk about before, we'll do the pre-scouting of how we feel like teams are going to prepare for different things. And because of that, we're able just to, change very specific parts of our offense to be able to get into things. So if they're going to switch something, we give this certain read, or if we know that they're bad playing a 5-1 pick and roll, we'll get into our horns or our step up action a little bit more. So definitely show all of it early and then work on it 3-on-3. And then I'm a really big believer of just letting guys figure it out. So we just go out there and we let them play after, even just a few days of trying to work on this.
Right. So your offense is going to look different team to team, depending on how you think they're going to defend and where you think your matchups are going to be.
Yeah, for sure. Like we're big on that. Like we want to be hard to scout in a lot of ways. So that like I was showing the 4-down action, teams get ready for that. And I think they get ready for our pin down and our flares, but everything within our points of emphasis change from game to game.
Okay. And I missed it earlier when you were showing the flow in the ball screen out of the blocker mover. Just, is there any principles for your blocker movers when you're getting into the ball screen series? They wanted to take another look at the video, but even if you can just walk us through verbally, because they'll get to see the video on the replay.
Like of how to get into the pick and roll, or
yeah, like how you get into the pick and roll from the from the blocker.
Yeah, for sure. So again, if it's a high post touch, we have that come together screen over the top. I have my board here.
Perfect.
So just make sure I have it here. So we have our 4 here, and we throw it in, and we come over the top, and we always have one guard clear through to the other side. And so if this is our other post on this side, like this, he's always raising up, and because that one guard is cleared through, these two are playing that initial pick and roll to be able to get into the ball screen continuous. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think that'll help them out for sure.
And the same thing on the low post touch. If you throw it into the low post, you come together. One guard's always cutting through, and then that leaves the big and the guard on this side to play the pick and roll on that side.
Perfect. Now, I did miss another one early on here for you. When you're putting together your layers of your offense, are you thinking about the end of the process or the beginning? So are you thinking about we're eventually going to end up flat ball screen or 45 ball screen, or are you thinking about, okay, this action and transition is going to be good, then this, then this? Are you starting front to back or back to front, I guess?
Well, I think you're always starting with transition. I think that's the key, making sure you're putting as much pressure as you can early on the shot clock. And so we like to work really hard on that aspect of it, of getting the ball up early and skipping all of those steps as far as whether we're getting penetration or we're getting a low post touch and into some type of our continuous flow. But I think the end goal in mind is always who we have to beat and how they're going to be able to guard things. So, we'll restrict certain things at practice to hold things back. So if one team's scoring every time, in transition or out of a pick and roll, maybe we want to get to the second side, or maybe we want to get into our horns. And so again, we'll try to, give guys, ways to earn extra points by doing those things in practice.